Let's go to the front of the Daily Telegraph in Sydney now. Sydney's been rocked by a massive storm earlier today, and as you can see on the front page of the Telegraph, there's a photograph of a Mercedes-Benz that's been crushed in the suburb of Gordon. But the splash, Caleb, is feds buy into biz. The federal government is going into the banking business with the big four banks tipping $100 million into a new $500 million fund to invest in small and medium-sized enterprises desperate for dough to grow. The Telly can reveal Treasurer Josh Frydenberg will bring legislation to Parliament next week to establish the Australian Business Growth Fund after overcoming resistance from the ANZ and Westpac, which along with the Commonwealth and NAB have now agreed to put in $100 million each, matching the contribution from taxpayers. I find it interesting that the ANZ and Westpac didn't want to really go along with this, but of course in light of recent events, they're now very much on side, as you would expect, Caleb.
Yeah, well, it's quite different to what we're reading on the front page of the Oz, isn't it? A tale of two different banking or sides of the banking sector. I do find it a bit curious, though. I mean, I generally don't like the intervention of the government in the market, but given the fact that the banks essentially are a guaranteed profit-making venture, thanks to the government. I mean, we'll bail the banks out if we ever need to. The idea that banks aren't lending to small and medium businesses to allow the economy to grow, so the government then has to intervene and chuck in a sizable amount of money so that they can lend money to these businesses and then convince the banks to get on board with it, seems a bit odd. Why aren't the banks lending in the first place? Because, of course, economic growth at the end of the day benefits the banks because it leads to better profits to them. I understand why the government's doing it, but I don't know why we haven't lent more on the banks to basically do their civic duty and help businesses get off the ground. It's almost like the banks have sat back and gone, oh no, we'll just let the government sort it out, that's their problem. But I mean, when you're talking about money flowing into business and that helping the economy at a time when we have record low interest rates, I don't know why we're not putting more pressure on the banks to borrow or to lend more readily.
Let's go back to the Telly and that extraordinary front page photo. And a massive thunderstorm lashed Greater Sydney, bringing down trees and cutting power to tens of thousands of homes. The Rural Fire Service says lightning has also sparked a number of new fires, bringing the total number of blazes burning across the state to 124.
They say when it rains, it pours. This unlucky electrician given the fright of his life as the storm quickly rolled in. A deluge of rain and strong winds are battering the harbour city, and further north in Gordon, apocalyptic scenes. Wind gusts up to 90 kilometres an hour have toppled trees, crushing cars. Residents braving the elements to catch a glimpse of the devastation. A veil of grey has also fallen over Bondi, the sunny beachside suburb now unrecognisable. Severe weather warnings are in place for the city and much of the coast, stretching from Bega to Newcastle, for gusty thunderstorms, strong winds and even large hailstones. But as Sky News weather meteorologist Rob Sharp explains, the threat will soon pass.
That's where we do have the potential for further storm activity in the next few hours. But by the time we get to midnight tonight, pretty much all of the wet weather will be off the coast as this system is continuing to track further east.
But from one extreme to another, the rain won't bring much relief for firefighters. They're preparing for storms to spark new fires in hard-to-reach areas. Roche Murdoch, Sky News.
Matt Cunningham, I can remember being in Darwin in about 2006, February 2006, and I reckon I heard the loudest clap of thunder I've ever heard in my life. It was at the end of the traditional build-up there, and it rained cats and dogs for about a month and a half. But, you know, you see that sort of photo on the front page of the Telly, and these storms can be absolutely lethal, can't they?
Well, that photo, when I first looked at it, I thought it was a file photo from Cyclone Marcus that hit here about 18 months ago, Gliso, and that's the sort of damage that storm was obviously packing. I mean, it's a case of droughts and flooding rains in New South Wales at the moment. They've had every sort of weather extreme You know, you're just coming off the back of those terrible bushfires, and now you see those storms, and then the lightning starting up the bushfires again. So, you know, it really has been a tough time for the people of New South Wales. You're right about that lightning here in Darwin. I remember when I first arrived here, standing on the back porch at the little 2-bedroom unit I was staying in Fanny Bay, and there was one of those lightning strikes, and I had to pinch myself to make sure I was still alive. They certainly pack a punch when they hit during those big electrical storms. But it is a beautiful time of the year in Darwin as well, and we're just heading into that wet season now. So everyone here is certainly looking forward to a bit of rain and a few lightning strikes as well.